Hey, welcome to another episode in the series called Behind the Shield. We're talking with former uh, law enforcement, military, first responders in general, just honoring their service, honoring what they do, what they've done. And I've got a great guest today. And I got to tell you, when you invite somebody to be on a podcast and they say, man, I don't know if my story is really, I mean, compared to some of the other stories that you've had on and some of the people, man, I haven't really done anything. When you have somebody say that, you get a glimpse of their humility and the kind of character that that person has. Because the guy today, our guest, is so humble, and looking at his resume, it is quite remarkable what he's accomplished, his experience in law enforcement. And so I had to bring him on, and I'm going to let him talk about himself, even though I bet he doesn't like to do that a whole lot, but we're going to get some of his perspective. But I want to introduce formally to the show, Mike Bohannon.
Good morning. How you doing?
Hey, good, man. So Mike, Richmond, Virginia, law enforcement from 95 to 2021, I think. I'll go down some of his high points that he's done. He's been around the entire, like he's done everything. So he's been a detective in the crime division, narcotics. He's done robbery task force. He has, patrol sergeant, canine sergeant. He's been in a police academy training, use of force supervisor. I can't wait to get into that, some of the details on that. He's been in the Richmond Swat training coordinator, executive officer in Richmond Swat for 10 years. So today he's doing a little something different. So Mike, tell him what we're doing now that you've retired from law enforcement, what you're doing now, man.
I'm actually in the lawn care business, working with Virginia Green, kind of doing a lot of logistics work for the company. Great company that I'm working for now.
And I will say, so if you can see behind me, if you're looking at this video on YouTube, folks, the flag Mike made with his bare hands. So tell me about this, about Cleanedge Woodworks.
Yeah, that's something I started probably about 3 years ago. I kind of grew up with my dad doing woodwork and learning all about doing woodwork and stuff, and just enjoyed doing it. And I've always done the framing type things, stuff like that. And then my son, he went to college about 4.5 years ago at Eastern Kentucky. He's also going in the line of first responders. He wants to be a firefighter. So he went there, graduated last year. And so I wanted to make him a thin red thin red line flag. And so I glued all this stuff up, went to make the union and dremeled all the little stars by hand, every little one, and made the red one, gave it to him with a note engraved on the back that he keeps with him all the time now. And then after a few people saw it, I started getting requests for more and more. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And I had fun doing it. But I was like, this Dremel thing takes a lot of time. I got to find another way to do it. So just got to doing a little bit of research, ended up buying a CNC machine and kind of started going down a different route. The beauty of it was coming home from law enforcement, you build up a lot of stuff. You may or may not have anybody to talk to. Sometimes we're taught, hey, just keep it inside. Don't share all that stuff because it's not the right thing to do. That became my outlet to go out in the garage and not worrying about anything but woodwork and sit there and just mess with wood and make things. And it helped me there. But the more beauty of it was, even though I started selling some of my work, just to see the smiles and the appreciation from people when they got it was just great to me. And I just love doing it. And the more I've started doing it, of course, I like to make a couple of dollars and buy more tools to build more stuff. But just again, to do it and have that area to let things go, and then just to return it to somebody else and see them get enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great motivator. And my kids were blown away when that thing arrived on my doorstep and I opened it. Man, I was counting the days and that thing showed up and I showed it to them. They couldn't believe somebody made that. And so I was like, yeah, I'm bringing him on the show. So yeah, man. So honoring the military and first responders in the months of September and October, man, we had, just as you know, we had the 20-year anniversary 9/11 last month. And man, where were you? What can you talk about some of the, obviously you were in law enforcement at the time. talk about some of your reaction, the emotion, and maybe some of the ways it affected your daily job just the days after all of that ensued.
I was actually, you mentioned it, I was a detective in our narcotics division working plain clothes. We were actually getting ready to go out to do an operation that morning when it happened. I'd walked by the break room, grabbed a snack before we were getting ready to brief on something, had the TV on in there, and actually saw when the first plane hit on the Today Show when that was going on. After that, it like kind of caught our attention. I think like most people, like, what in the world's going on? This is a huge accident, you're thinking. And then you watch the second one hit and it's like, nah, this is not an accident. From there on our side, and for me, it's just like, okay, where's this going for us now? This is obviously not just something small. What are we getting ready to do? And everything just kind of started going on a heightened alert of what are we doing now? What's getting ready to happen? Where are we going? What are we going to do? So it just kind of changed your mindset and outlook on where we're going. Probably the biggest thing I remember about it, though, looking back at it now, and I heard somebody else say it the other day, is the unity. The unity we had back then, the day after that happened in America, and just where we are today is so different. And to be able to go back to that unity would be so awesome, and just move us further.
Yeah, and I would hope that we don't need another 9/11 to bring us back, right? I would hope we don't need
Absolutely.
something to that caliber to unite us, even though the unity was great, like you said. How did it, like, your daily life, like just in the general crime uh, environment in Richmond, Richmond, Virginia? I don't know what the crime rate there is, if it's high or if it's average or what, but how did you have to sort of step your game up when it came to kind of maintaining order in the streets? Or, I mean, obviously you were narcotics, so you had these tactical missions you were on, but did you notice any spikes throughout the city just from the fallout of 9/11?
I wouldn't say it was related directly to 9/11. And more so in the narcotic side, we're dealing with drug
Yeah.
interdiction, drug sales, and that kind of stuff with what we were doing in that particular division. But I was also working with the SWAT team at the time, very new. Um, so I would say we saw more of an impact there just because now we're at a more heightened readiness for that type of event,
Right.
whether it was suspicious vehicles, suspicious packages, where we would go out and work with our EOD unit. So I would say it was more so on the tactical side of it that we saw a little bit of change and just more of an increased awareness of what was going on in our surroundings, in our community, in our communities around us, because we all work very close together with each other, and then in our state levels, and just monitoring more of that information and what was going on at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet you guys were all pretty much on the edge of your seats, just kind of in a from a readiness standpoint. Like you said, you're always heightened alert, especially when you're on some sort of SWAT or narcotics team. You're always just right there. And you mentioned something earlier, kind of that this woodworking has been an outlet. And you mentioned you said something that was interesting, that you guys deal with some stuff, right? And you need someone to talk to. Not everybody's talking, and not everybody in law enforcement's verbalizing some of the challenges mentally, emotionally they're having. Man, you have any experiences that maybe you felt like you were getting kind of pushed to that limit, or just some of the day in and day out rigors of the job, man? How did you cope during those situations?
Luckily, I am a Christian. I would say that was one of my biggest things, because you're right, in the law enforcement world, first responder world in general, I would say you're kind of taught, especially back in the day, I'll call it, since I'm kind of in the old guy status now. Um, you were taught not to really talk about that stuff. It wasn't cool. You're supposed to just internalize it, and you build this stuff up over time. And every critical incident you go on, every situation you're dealing with, good or bad, whether it's work or personal, that stuff builds up. I've had a couple of incidents during my career. One, just an internal thing that went on, but I was very strong in my faith. God talked to me during that, whether it was through Sunday school lessons, messages from our pastor at the time. It was perfect timing for what he was telling me how to handle that situation. I still haven't healed from that particular situation, but I'm still daily talking to God about it. I will say the other bigger one is probably last year, the last 18 months with all the protests across the country. Some places didn't have protests, some did. They just saw it on the news. Richmond did. We had it for a long time. It changed the policing world in Richmond, the way we did things for a long time, and then going forward, the way they're going to do things. But particularly, we were involved heavy. To hear people telling you every day you should die, your family should die, you're worthless, just everything you can think, probably you don't think of, most people don't think of, painted on buildings, painted on cars, and you see it 24/7 every day. It can build, but you're supposed to just suck it up and go on, move on,
Right.
And be a man. Is, I'll call it that. Is what the world teaches.
Right.
But luckily, I have a very strong background in my Christian faith, and God got me through that. I had a great church family that checked on me. My immediate family checked on me. Everybody was on, whether it was coming to the house and checking on my family while we were working. That's what got me through all that. And I don't know how people get through it without having that Christian background and knowing that there's more than this world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I can only, you probably saw teammates, guys you worked with who maybe weren't strong in their faith. There are guys that, throughout that just don't, they bottle it up. Like you said, they don't have faith and they don't know how they cope. And that's what I would ask is, did you have to maybe reach down and pull some guys up and just encourage and speak into them? Because I know you had leadership roles throughout law enforcement as well. And during this last, year and a half, this tougher time, did you pour in anybody? Did you invest in anybody? Did you kind of, anybody sort of watch your faith from afar, and did that impact them?
I would first say, I hope so. I hope that I impacted somebody. I think that's our role as Christians, is we're supposed to be impacting and being that light every single day. Yep. So I hope that I had more positive than I did negative on many people. But yeah, I would say I'm lucky that I didn't see anybody get to that extreme level where like they needed dire help. But I could see people that when it was wearing on them and it was tearing on them, whether it was this last 18 months dealing with the protest and everything, or even before that. And kind of my goal was, one, I've got to live it out before I can tell them how to do it. I've got to try to live it out. And that's what I tried my best to do. But really just trying to talk to them when I see it. I had several friends that I would just talk to and remind that, hey, get out of that negativity, stay away from that negativity, and talk about it. Again, I can't stress enough how we as law enforcement, first responders, we don't like to talk about it most of the time. Yeah. And I've really last few years tried to get people to understand it's okay to talk about it. Am I the best at it? Nope. I still don't do well with it, but I try to force myself to do it. But it's also got to be with the right person, somebody you trust. And I tried to be that person for whoever needed it, whether it was on our team, in the division I'm working in. That's what we're called to do. And that's what I try to do and hopefully did for somebody.
Yeah. And you, like we talk about all the time on the show, that people are watching, even if you don't know they are, and you're planting seeds, even if you don't ever really see the harvest from it. So I can almost be convinced that what you were doing was making an impact. Something I mentioned, or I forgot to mention in your experience, where you're a volunteer firefighter for like 14 years, and the next generation, your son, right, is going to be a firefighter as well. What do you say to him? If we're talking about just ways to impact folks coming into that career, what do you, talking about some of the emotions you're dealing with, have you expressed that to him, that it's okay? Like, obviously you have, and you're encouraging him to find somebody to really kind of have as an accountability structure or support system. What are you saying to that next generation? If you had a room full of your sons, that have guys that are embarking on this career, what do you say to them to encourage them to maybe be more courageous about talking about this stuff?
I'd say two things. One, being a Christian really helps with it because it makes you realize that it's not just this world, that you have the eternity to look forward to. Um, and you have somebody that's always there with you. In this world, we don't know who's going to change what day, but God's never going to change. He's always the same. He's always there with us. And if
Mm-hmm.
you keep that with you all the time, it doesn't make the bad things go away, but it makes it easier to deal with, having that faith. So one, I've always told, we've raised my son, my children, going to church, serving other people, that's what being a first responder is you're serving other people. So you've got to go into that mindset and have that going with you at all the time. And I've poured this into him, but again, they're our kids, and we're old guys. We don't know nothing,
That's
but
right.
they are listening. The other thing I would tell them in the first responder world, and I did the same thing when I was in the fire department. I thought that's all I wanted to do, and that's what I focused on. You've got to find time to be outside of that, whether it's the fire department, the police department, the rescue squad. You have to find time outside of just doing that, or you're going to burn out. You will burn out doing it. So you've got to find time to relax, to be with your family, to be with your friends, to serve other people in your church and your community. And that's where I find my enjoyment and passion now too, is when we're doing those things at church and going out into the community and serving others that need help.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're called to do. And that's what helps. That's what relieves that stress for me.
Yeah, yeah, and we talked a little bit about this before we hit record, but what I guess what got you into this line of work, and then there must have been some challenges to maintain balance in your faith. You mentioned that you grew up in church and then hit that, like we all do, kind of that rebellious stage, that experimentation phase of we got to learn some hard lessons on our own phase. Talk about some of that and kind of what got you in the line of work, and then how you balanced and struggled and maybe had that tug of war within your faith, and how that evolved, I guess.
Yeah, I grew up in church. My mom and dad took me to church. My father was a pastor. So we were at church every Sunday. I served all the time doing stuff in the youth and everything. So that was a way of life. But again, I won't say everybody, but a lot of children, especially these days, once you get to that point of freedom where you can do what you want, sometimes we make the good decisions, sometimes we don't. And honestly, I didn't. I said, hey, I've been told what I'm going to do for so long. Now
Yeah.
I get to decide what I'm going to do. And I decided to not go to church every Sunday anymore and do that kind of thing. And I went down the wrong road for a while. It's just like I've told my children. I'm not saying I had bad friends, but it's also, you got to pick the right people to hang out with and what you're going to do. Because if you don't have the right people guiding you and making those right decisions, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while, I wasn't on that right road. And what brought me back was my wife started going to church after we were married. She started going here to a local church, and she got me going back with her. And from there on, I've been locked back in ever since. I just got back into it and realized, man, this is so much better of a life to live. I still have hiccups. I still have hurdles to get through and problems, but man, that to have God with me every day and to have Christian family and friends with me in times of need, you can't ask for more than that. But our world doesn't always see that. So it does happen. But if you can just take those baby steps to getting back or going for the first time and then find that relationship with God, it's going to make those tough times so much easier to handle. I don't know how, if I was where I was 20 years ago when I wasn't on the right road, I don't know if I'd have been here today, going through the things I've gone through.
Let's face it, as Christians, we get frustrated, we get impatient, in fact, we get judgmental with God. Like, I can't imagine without a faith in Christ what that life would be like. I mean, I lived it for a long time, and I can tell you it was a lonely, empty place. But especially nowadays, man, we're in a different climate. The world looks a whole lot different. But so I mean, why law enforcement? I mean, you grow up with family, like a long pedigree of law enforcement in your family. I mean, why law enforcement?
Absolutely not at all. My dad was, he ran with the volunteer rescue squad even while he was a pastor. So that kind of was in my blood, the first responder thing. I always wanted to be a fireman. Like you said, I started with the volunteer fire department like I was 14, 15 years old as a cadet, riding with the fire station and doing what I was allowed to do until I turned 18. And once I was able to start taking a test in the paid fire departments back then, I took a couple of tests. And at the same time, I said, well, let me go throw my name in the hat for the police department and go do that. Well, at the same time, I'm taking a couple of fire tests. I took the law enforcement test with Richmond Police Department, made it through, and they offered me a job. I'm like, hey, all right, I'll do this thing. And 25 and a half years later, here I am finishing up that career.
Wow,
so
man.
Technically, I was supposed to be going down the fire department road, ended up in the police department role, but hopefully my son's going to carry it back the other way with the fire department.
That's so good. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, I don't know that if you felt led spiritually to go down that route, or you just have always been a natural servant and wanted to protect people and serve people. Maybe that's it. But the fact that you just kind of jumped into that kind of on a, I don't know, kind of a willy nilly, let me throw my name in the hat. And then 25, 26, whatever, how many years later, like that takes discipline, like to stay on that track, to stay on that road. And even though I'm guessing there were a lot of times you could have said, this isn't worth it. I'm throwing it. I'm going to do something else. Like this isn't happening. Like, I'm sure you had plenty of opportunity to bug out on that, but man, just staying faithful in that and disciplined, man. Man, I ask most people this, but as far as military law enforcement, like you guys are structured. You guys are very disciplined. You're very head down, like there's a mission and there's a plan and we're tactically going to go get it and be done and check that box, right? Well, along the way, did you surprise yourself? Like what disciplines and just the way it shaped you throughout your life? Like what became of Mike Bohannon because of the disciplines he learned in law enforcement? Like what inside you translated to the rest of your life that the law enforcement world built in you? Anything?
Well, I would say it probably started as well when I went into the military. I was with Virginia Air National Guard, and just going there, I didn't have a lot of that. I'll call it the military type discipline until going into that. And I think I got a lot of it from there, and then transitioned that into going into law enforcement. And back then, when you went through the police academy, it was paramilitary. So, and some agencies are not like that anymore. So I think combining that military, a little bit of military background, and then going into law enforcement, that kind of set the regimen going down the road for the way the discipline was. Now, I will say I've learned along being a parent, sometimes that can be too much. I have learned being a parent, you can ask my kids, that probably sometimes I was too strong with some of it. And I have learned since then, to letting your kids make their mistakes, and you're not going to keep them out of everything. That's been very hard for me because of so much of the discipline.
Right.
I would share that with young parents today, that to let your children learn to make those mistakes, even though we want the best for them, they're going to have to make some of them on their own and learn those. But it's been good and bad having that discipline. The bad on that parenting side, the bad as a leader, I would say, this is talking about leadership. I think some of the things I learned along the way was it created very, very high expectations.
Yeah.
From being in the military, what the levels of expectations there are. Even the volunteer fire department, and then in the law enforcement side, and I'll take it even a step further with the SWAT stuff. Your mistakes can cost lives. So that being disciplined is very important. But you've got to learn where to use it, how to use it, and watch those expectations, because I have had very high expectations as for people that worked with me. And sometimes that's hurt me. And some of the things I've done, that has been a lesson that I've learned.
Yeah, that's good. And I like you said, that military, that early military in some of your more formative years, I guess, probably built a good foundation to then follow it with some of the law enforcement training. And as you evolved in that career, like you just kind of kept going up the ladder there. And then SWAT team, I could see that being pretty parallel with some of the military mentalities and just tactics and things like that. Man, Were you were SWAT during the last couple years of your
Yeah, until
career?
the day I left. Yep.
Yeah, and so that would encompass the protests that you were mentioning earlier. You were involved in a lot of that. So I gotta kind of bend this a little bit because of how we see all the negativity in the world, and we see some of the real polarizing displays of rebellion, like the protesting, just some of the defund police and these kinds of just craziness. Um, Man, as a Christian, and you're on the streets and you're having people say what they say and do what they do, and you're there to maintain order and enforce the law. Uh, at what point did you battle, or did you have to kind of negotiate within your own spirit of, okay, I know there's a scripture that says turn the other cheek, but I'm also here to protect and serve, and God doesn't just expect us to roll over when people are imposing their will or force on us, right? Was there any sort of internal kind of back and forth with you, or did you just kind of have a line and compartmentalize, look, this is good. This is what I'm supposed to be. This is my job. If somebody gets out of line and this is what I have to do, I have to do it. Like, talk about that. I've never really asked anybody that question, but I got to know, as a Christian, there's that battle going on inside you probably at some point.
It is. You probably said a key word there is whether good or bad, compartmentalized. You take a lot of it and you just kind of set it aside. Um, you, we all know what's right and wrong. But as a Christian, we know how we're supposed to treat people and serve people.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you said it earlier. That's kind of what just my life has been about. I love to serve people, whether it's as a first responder or as a Christian serving with my local church, whatever it is. And that's what I saw my whole career as. And I'll say most policemen are there to serve other people.
Yeah.
Whether they're a Christian or not, they're there to serve other people. So to go into the events that all of our law enforcement across the country went through the last couple of years, we're still doing our job. But for me, we keep in mind, I have to do what's right and wrong. I have to enforce the law. I have to also follow the commands that I'm given, what we can enforce and what we can't. And you said it there. Sometimes we do have to sit there and take what they're giving us. If you could have seen some of the protest lines of people in your face, taking a cigarette, inhaling that smoke and just blowing it in your face, and then telling you all that stuff that I mentioned earlier. And yes, you just stand there and we have to take it. Unfortunately, that's what we do.
Right.
But on the other side of that, things would change where we saw people burning things. If it was property, it's property that can be replaced. But there was a time we saw buildings being set on fire with people inside, with children and babies inside. And then we saw the fire trucks from multiple jurisdictions coming down the road to go save these people and put the fire out, and protesters blocking the fire trucks to not allow them. They're climbing on the fire trucks to prevent them. And we're running down the street 2 and 3 blocks to catch up to this, and having to get people off those trucks and create a way for those firemen to go into harm's way and save these people and get them out. Meanwhile, because the firemen couldn't get there, the policemen were going inside and pulling these people out of the buildings. But at the end of the day, nothing was done wrong. Not to go down a rabbit hole.
That's a new low for people there to do that. That's a whole new low, even for protesters.
Yeah, but it's tough. But I would say at the end of the day, all the law enforcement community, they knew what's right and wrong. And we were there to protect everybody, even those that were there to exercise their constitutional rights, right or wrong ways. We were there to protect them as well. That's why we escorted them across the street. We escorted them into a park so that they could still say, "Die pig," that kind of thing. So
yeah, let me keep you safe so you can keep hating me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's what a interesting dynamic going on that you had to live through. And, you know, the old adage of sticks and stones will break my bones, words will never hurt me. You know, that might be a myth, because I think after time, those words do start to sink in to your core, and you start really internalizing some of that. But man, I mean, just on behalf of the audience, thank you for having, you know, what you did through that time, and what those guys are still doing, guys you still know that you worked alongside, and they're still having to deal with some of that. And man, I really, I hope we can, I hope God intervenes or comes back, you know, one of the two. And so I hope it gets a lot better for first responders, because they don't deserve that. And you guys are putting your lives on the line for the people that are hating you like that. To me,
Right.
that just is counterintuitive. But I digress and I move on. And I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. But man, so we talk about, you know, giving advice to yourself, and you kind of get to do that with a son following in some of your footsteps. But if you were to talk to Mike Bohannon 4 years ago, what would you say coming in? Would you do it again? Would you pick a different career path? What would you say to that person that would maybe better prepare you for that journey? Or what would you say that you wish somebody would have said to you?
I would stay what I did. I've loved every minute of it. It was a super tough decision to leave.
Mm.
It was definitely a God thing. I had with our particular department, you can get your full retirement at 25 years, and I had been planning for a while that, hey, I'm not going to walk out the door at 25 years, but I'll be ready. But I don't know what God's got in store. He had an amazing plan. And about this protest stuff had been going on, and about, I don't know, 6, 8 months prior to, someone contacted me about the job that I have now and told me about it. And I'm like, what am I going to do from law enforcement to a lawn care company? I got the job description and I was like, oh my goodness. This was like, I sat down and wrote the exact job
Oh,
description
wow.
that I would want to do next. It was unbelievable. That's why I say it's a
Wow.
God thing. God knew
Wow.
what he had planned for me next, but still the connections I have with my closest friends that I've had for years and years and worked beside and been through the good and the bad and hurt. That's tough to just walk away from, but talking with my wife and praying about it and talking with Christian friends, it was definitely the right thing to do. And God laid it out there for me. And it's been one of the best things that's happened. It's just been amazing. Every day, my wife will tell you, man, you're so happy now, coming home from work every day. It's a world of difference. But would I do law enforcement again? Yes. If they needed me tomorrow to step back into a mission, would I go? Yes.
Wow.
That's, I feel like I was born to serve people, and until I'm gone, I still would serve in that capacity. I try to serve people in my current job now. Um, as I'm learning a lot, there's always a way to serve, and I'm going to continue looking for that. But I would do it again. How would I do it differently? Probably one, it would have been so much easier staying on that narrow road,
Yeah.
and being that Christian from the get go and making better decisions from the get go through my entire
Mm.
career.
Mm-hmm.
It would have guided me so much better. And also just so many leadership lessons I learned. I think sometimes I probably did some good things. I feel like I probably did more bad than good, but um,
We learn from those, though,
absolutely.
from what not to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If I was a writer, I probably could have written a book on the things I learned through that. But hopefully just those, if I were doing it again, from those lessons I've learned now of being in those leadership roles, of the better way of treating people, how to accomplish things a little bit better, things of that nature.
Well, God gives us kids for multiple reasons.
Yep.
And one of them might be so that you can maybe give him a little bit of the answers to the test so he doesn't walk down that same path, or so he does, and
Right.
knows which corners to go around and what alerts to be aware of. So, yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, we all have that journey we travel. We could have done something maybe a little better, but I think it's awesome that you Man, and you said you would go back tomorrow if they needed, and that speaks a lot to the brotherhood and to the mission, like to the cause, right? I think that says a lot for no matter what you guys have gone through and what you went through personally, you would still go sign up for that again, like just to be able to protect and serve. And I think that speaks volumes across the country, because I bet that's a common theme from people that do what you do. So one more for you. We talked a lot about this protest thing, and we talked a lot about some of the hate that's out there, the division that's out there, just some of the warped thinking in relation to law enforcement and first responders that's out there. What's a misconception that, and I'll call it civilian world, has that the non first responder world, the non law enforcement, non military, because you did some of that early on. What's a misconception that we have about you guys as people, and then your approach to the job you do?
One key word again, you just said, we're people just like you. We're human. We're not some pre-programmed robot that goes into the police academy and they plug a USB cord into you and download all the right answers and all the right responses, both mental and physical. I try to tell people when I'm trying to explain this stuff to them, if you've ever been in a fight before, try being in that fight, but remembering you've got rules, the other one doesn't. You've got to remember those rules. At the same time, you're human and you don't want to die at the end of it. You're trying to survive that fight. And it's different. Most people still, even telling that story, don't understand that. So I would say most people should understand that we're just like you. We have to make the same exact decisions that you do, but we have to make them in a split second. And we make mistakes. There's not a profession out here that doesn't make a mistake. We're just like that. We have bad apples, just like every profession has bad apples. But at the end of the day, we're all there to serve other people. Everybody I worked with came to work every day to serve others. We wanted to save that person from a burning building, or pull that person from a wrecked car, or get that victim away from a domestic assault, or the person that had been shot. If we didn't care the way people make us out to be, we wouldn't be putting tourniquets on people that are shot, that are supposed to be for us, that are laying on the ground.
Yeah.
Helping injured people. But we truly do care. And we truly do want to help people. And sometimes we make mistakes just like everyone else does. They just get publicized at a greater detail than anything else.
Yep. Yeah. That's well said. I couldn't agree more. I think, you hear about one bad story and then it becomes the norm, and it becomes just this blanketed persona or stereotype, right? It's just blanketed because of one or two bad scenarios by humans who make mistakes and quite frankly maybe are just bad people. But that doesn't speak for the entirety of first responder community. So unfortunately, and that could be used in any facet of life, in a particular race. We can't generalize based on isolated incidents or people. But man, I want to, is there anything maybe that you want to just, I don't know, get off your chest or speak into the lives of first responders right now and their families? Because those are sometimes people who are overlooked, right? The families of the law enforcement first responder community. You have anything to say to those folks out there right now that are still in the job and you've retired, but those folks out there that maybe have, need to hear something from you?
To the ones that are still doing it, thank you. And there are many of us out here that still support you. Just be careful every day. Go home every day. Keep doing the right things. To the families, keep supporting them. I'm grateful that I had an amazing family. My wife and my 3 kids all supported me tremendously through my entire career, and especially the last 2 years. Every day, phone calls and cards and everything. Keep supporting them, and know that we compartmentalize. It's tough for us to talk about. We'd all always want to. It's for me, it's just the way I was and still am in some ways, but continue to support them and be there for them. To everyone else, those families need support outside of that. I will say that I had a great church family that supported my family when we were gone during these protests for 5 and 6 months straight, doing this stuff day and night.
Wow.
They were committed to taking care of my family nonstop the entire time. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Wow.
And it doesn't have to be just a church family. Somebody asked me the other day, well, how do we change this? And I said, not that I have the answers, but the good have got to start standing up and speak. It's a little more than just running across me and whispering, hey, thanks for what you did. I appreciate it. I'm behind you. That's not going to change where we're at today. We've not only got to stand up for the oppressed and stand up for those that need the help, we've also got to stand up for those that are doing right. And until we get a mass majority, a mass voice standing up and doing that, this climate's not going to change. And that's a Christian's role, is to stand up and do that and support each other and love each other. And what better than to change the world through God's grace coming through us?
That's right.
But until we do that, we're going to keep looking at the same things.
No, you're right. And you put a bow on that perfectly. And I just wanted to thank you. I mean, thank you for the creativity and your talent of what you do woodworking with this behind me. I mean, I love this more than anything I have really in this office. And thank you for what you've done. I mean, I speak for the audience that says thank you for being in first responder role and really enforcing what there needs to be done to protect us, and for being a man of faith in that environment. Thank you for that. And now you're raising up the next generation. So audience, this has been a blessing to me. I know you guys have benefited from it as well. He's been Mike Bohannon. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.